To have been able to call Frank a very close friend for the past 8 or 9 years. For many years, I was his webmaster and did his website, and we promoted him all over the world. And on the basis of having lost Frank, I changed gears and decided that I thought it would be nice and also appropriate to do a little workshop here. Kind of for those of you who know Frank, you'll be familiar with some of the music. If you're not familiar with him, we'll introduce you to his music and do a tribute to the man and his music. And in the little booklet that I passed out to you, it has a little brief information about Frank on the cover, and then inside it has listings of original compositions and also arrangements that Frank did. And I'm going to be doing some excerpts from several of those pieces today. And we're going to be competing against whatever is going on in that room there. Wow. Not easy. By way of introduction, this is the Frank Marocco arrangement. I heard him play it on a CD that he made and also on a concert. And I called Frank up. I said, Frank, I said, I love the way you do it, your changes in there and the way you do this. He says, can you write that out so that we accordionists out here can get a little feel for that? I said, sure. So he wrote the arrangement and he dedicated it to the Accordion man. For those of you who know who that is, you know what that's all about. And you'll probably recognize the name of the tune. Appreciate the applause, but this is a workshop, and we can save the time. You know, if we have 12 applauses that last a half a minute each, that's 6 minutes, right? so we can save 6 minutes. I appreciate it. We can maybe do one at the end. I thank you. So I want to tell you a little bit about these numbers too, not just playing. That is a typical Frank Marocco type of a arrangement, where he uses basses very melodically. And the bass line in this moves. And then off of that he builds the chords for the melody. And he starts with stating the tune itself, and then in his way he would write a solo part that would be similar to an improvisation that he might do that would be suitable for that tune. And of course he never said that you have to play his music exactly the way it's written. He offered it as suggestions, and you could take the music and do with it what you want. So that was his arrangement with a song in my heart. Now, he was also a composer. And in the last 10 years of his life, he composed probably over 50 numbers, and they've all been recorded. Also, he was, for many, many years, he was the #1 fella in Hollywood that they would call for doing recordings and the movies and commercials. And you've all heard Frank Marocco many, many times and didn't even know it. He's on the backtracks of movies, TV shows, commercials, that sort of thing. I remember first time I got this piece early on. This was a piece written back in 2003. He wrote this for a TV commercial. I had heard it on the TV, and I heard this accordion playing, and it sounded really neat. And then when I met Frank Marocco and found out that he was the fella not only playing it, but he also composed it, that was quite impressive. It was for a French, something to do with a French thing, and it was a French number he wrote, and he called it Memories of Paris. And he just took a little idea and made a complete tune out of it. And this one you may recognize, goes like this. Pretty little piece, pretty little French piece. Now he is. Okay. Now he did in later years. Around this one is 2008. So that you can see how recent this music is. We're not talking about music that was written 20, 30, 40 years ago. This is within the last decade that all this music has become available to us accordionists. He wrote several French musette type tunes. This is one he wrote in 2008. He called it French Toast. And I took a couple of liberties with it, which he approved of, and dressed it up a little bit. But all the basic music you're going to hear is here for you to play. Do we have a radio going here? Or is that next door? That's next door. Wow, it sounds like it's coming right from here. That's good. You want to hear it sometime. Yeah. Okay. This is French Toast. What is it? Oh, I thought I heard something. Something playing here.
I wasn't even aware that I had this in my
Oh, okay.
He was taking you and then played it back. Nice.
Okay. French Toast. French Toast. Cute little number, cute little number. Now getting back to arrangements. Once again, Frank arranged numbers, and I'm going through these just to show you the great variety of what he had done over the years. Here's another familiar tune. Always very creative in his musical ideas, and he always put it out there, and it's things that we can steal, we can use, we can apply to any other music that we may be performing. Here's another very popular, familiar tune. What key is she in? Very nice. Thank you. Now, back several years ago, in the late 2000s, Piazzolla-isms started spreading all over the world, and became very big and very popular. And I remember Frank calling me up one day, and he says, "I'm looking for a chart for a tune called Oblivion." I had never even heard of this tune. I didn't even know it existed. He says, "Yeah, it's a Piazzolla, this guy Piazzolla, and he's South American. He's written all these tango pieces, and they're really great." So I made some calls. I got a hold of Peter Suave, some of you know Peter, and wrote him an email. He was out in France. I asked him if he had a lead sheet. So he emailed me the lead sheet. I emailed it to Frank, and then he did some further research and came up with some other charts for it, and he made a beautiful arrangement. I'm not going to do the entire arrangement, but just give you a flavor of Frank's interpretation on an acoustic Stradella accordion. Remember, the Piazzolla wrote for the bandoneon. So Frank was able to adapt this music to the Stradella accordion, and this was his treatment of Oblivion. And of course, he has a section in there that goes. And so forth. So So there's much more to it than what I just did, but I want to give you a taste and flavor of that. Now, staying with Astor Piazzolla, because I think Frank did 5 or 6 numbers of Astor Piazzolla, Colombre and Jean Paul, and then this very popular piece, which almost every musician in the world is doing or has done or wants to do. And he's called Libertango. There's also another intermediate section in between there where he puts in more of the theme. But just show you the way Frank had the versatility to make those changes and adapt Piazzolla music. Any of his arrangements that you get Piazzolla, they're very, very effective. He has one that was written for 2 guitars, Loche Vendra, which he adapted for the Stradella accordion, and it's very, very effective, very, very well done. Frank knew just how to combine what notes in the right hand with what notes in the left hand and what rhythms to make it sound big and full and yet be playable and doable. After all, he played these tunes too, so he didn't write something that he wasn't able to play or do himself. Here's a piece he wrote in 2003. Show you how melodic. He always wrote a lot of melody. You won't hear him writing things that are way out, although some of it is really cool, his changes when we get into some of the jazz. But this now is a beautiful melody. He called it Bella Chitarra, which means beautiful guitar. Now there is more to it, of course, but just to give you a flavor. 1923, a composer by the name of Franz Lehrer, who was an Austro-Hungarian, lived from 1870 to 1948, and probably most well known for his Merry Widow Waltz. Wrote many operettas. In 1923, he wrote an operetta called Land of Smiles. And in that, a tune that has been done for many, many years all over the world, called Dein ist mein ganzes Herz, which translated means, yours is my heart alone. If you go to a music publisher, that sort of thing, and get a lead sheet on this, sounds like this. Pretty melody. Frank loved to take pretty melodies and dress it up a little. Yes, put some earrings on it, some lipstick, and a pretty dress. So Frank took Yours Is My Heart Alone and came up with this interpretation. Little bit different treatment than what the original was. But this is also, one of Frank's arrangements. And the wonderful thing is he made these available to the world. One of Frank's favorite composers, and a good friend of Frank's, right there in Hollywood. We knew him by a different name, but Frank used to call him Hank. Henry Mancini, from the Pink Panther. Frank, you'll see this on YouTube. You'll hear it on his records. He liked this tune. He made a real nice treatment of it, and one that we could steal from Frank and use and emulate. It's Meglio Stasera. It had better be tonight. Frank Marocco, Amelia Stazera. Nice arrangement. What he did, gave us enough things in there to work on and pull out and extrapolate and do with it, you know, what we would like. "2007, 5 years ago. Little known piece that Frank came out with. He sent it out, we put it on his website, offered it. I printed out a copy. I say I printed out because everything we did was digital and on PDFs. But he wrote this melody, and I started playing into it, and to me it just appealed. It was so haunting, and the name was so much a part of what the music was about. He called this reminiscing. Pretty little melody that he wrote there. I mean, of course, in his style of arranging, he writes a little fill in it, quasi improvised fill in that you can do there. But Frank, even though he loved simple melodies, had the ability to do things somewhat complex. And one of the popular pieces that he wrote back in 2003 has become a standard with many jazz accordionists, and they feature it in their repertoire. It's a 5/4 piece, and back in 1961 or 62, Dave Brubeck introduced the 5/4 beat to the jazz world, and it became a big hit. Well, Frank took a 5/4 piece, and naturally he was very clever in his naming of tunes. He happened to call this one Take 10. So 5/4, Take 10. think it's easy, huh? But you can hear his, I mean, the creativity in this man's mind that he would put in here. The chord changes were just magnificent. Here's a little known tune, but the chord changes in this are just phenomenal. He wrote this around 2006, called Ti voglio bene. It must be Italian, right? Very pretty changes. I don't know where he came up with those ideas. Terrific, beautiful changes. Let's see. There's so much. The Samba Italiano he wrote, which is terrific. He even took pop tunes. You'll recognize this one. He took this tune and made a great arrangement. Recognize it?
Yeah. She loves me.
Stevie Wonder. And it goes on and on and on. Terrific arrangement of nice introduction. Can you guess the tune. Of course, it goes on for pages and pages with a beautiful, really neat quasi-improvised solo on there. Frank was a very sensitive and spiritual man. Those of you who had ever had the chance to meet him and talk with him knew he was very soft-spoken, very kind, very gentle, never had a bad word to say about anybody. And it was always a pleasure speaking with him. And that kind of revealed his spiritual side. And in keeping with that, he did, in fact, one of his books was spiritual songs. Beautiful arrangement that he made of the Schubert Ave Maria. And it's very appropriate to be played at weddings, funerals, and just about any place. People love it. It's not difficult, but the way he voices it, it's very effective. Shows a sense of creativity and the beauty of the man. He also did Ave Maria by Bach. So you're familiar with that tune there. He was more than jazz. He was a whole man, a whole human being. arrangement of the Lord's Prayer. Just great. Another request from Lenny Feldman to Frank, and he did a neat little arrangement of this. What do you think he did here? Yeah, he goes. He's got a whole thing written out on there, but we're short on time, and I do want to close with this one. This tune is very special to me because it's my favorite Frank Marocco tune. It's a ballad, beautiful ballad. He wrote it back in 2003 for his wife Anne, and he calls it Ballad for Anne. And I had, looking back now, with the way things happen and change in life and circumstances change, and you think you're going to have, friends, forever. And things change in life. Last year, in 2011, at the Frank Marocco Accordion event in Mesa, Arizona, we had a big celebration for Frank, his 80th birthday. Some of you were there. Some of you were there. You saw that. And I was invited to play on a special concert program they had for Frank. And thinking what to play, I said, and Frank was there with his wife Anne and his 3 daughters and grandchildren and son-in-laws. And it was just a wonderful family gathering. And I says, Frank, for you and Anne, I mean, one of the most beautiful tunes you ever wrote, called Ballad for Anne. And I took some liberties with it. I don't play it exactly the way it's written on there, but he wrote such a beautiful chart, and you were able to do things with it. So this was my interpretation of Ballad for Anne. Howard for that beautiful song. And that came to Frank's mind. His ideas, and he wrote it out on paper. So that gives you a little flavor, a little bit about the man and his music. I do have